I'm Dr. Cécile Cosculuela. Welcome to this ESL video on English grammar and more precisely on verb operators. So, verb operators are actually the first part that we need to deal with in order to talk about the verb equation. So the verb equation is actually the main topic of the book that is related to the present video. And this book is part of the verb triad books. That is a group of 3 books that are related and one leads on to the other. So the first one is on the verb equation. And how to use the verb equation? Well, that is thanks to the verb formulas, which are the topic of the second book of this triad. And then that leads on to the third book, which is about the English verb matrix, a one-page synoptic overview of the system of tenses in English. Okay, so actually these 3 books are meant to enable students of English as a second language to feel completely at ease when it comes to forming verb phrases, verb groups. Okay, so first of all, before we get started, it is important to remind the students that any language includes 3 different parts that all need to be worked on. The first one is vocabulary or lexical notions, and of course you need to know how to pronounce words and how to write them. So phonemes and graphemes are the second really important part that you need to deal with when you learn any language. And then once you have the bricks, so to speak, so the different elements that you need to make a sentence, then you need the mortar or the glue or the necessary tool that will enable you to link those words together and make a sentence. And these tools are called here operators. They are grammar operators, and they're really necessary, very simple to use, and very useful. So this work actually that I'm presenting to you now is based on the fact that many students when they write in English, this is an example of an exam paper, they come up with sentences that they probably weren't sure about. Like here we have, they will be told to. And then another example would be, you didn't be seeing. Or also when students write, she doesn't have left. Or he was being told. So all these kind of sentences, I'm sure when the students write their landlines have done away with, and sentences like these, they must be feeling, you must be feeling when you read a sentence like this that something is not quite right. So you feel it, you sense it, and then you need a tool to make sure that this is actually not correct, and also to know how to correct these sentences. So this is what we're going to go over in this video. And we're actually going to see that there are 2 important parts, because sometimes when you write a sentence like this one here, he may have seen a shrink, or I took care of the children. Well, these verb forms or verb phrases, they sound correct, but then if you look at the context, then you might wonder if they really are, and that is what we will do at the end of this video. So what we want is to know what tools to use in order to come up with verb phrases, verb forms that are correct. So it is always much more interesting to do the work yourself, and actually I would advise you at this point to pause the video and write down your own list of tools that we can use to create verb forms like the ones we have seen and which are not correct. Okay? And okay, so either you do that or you do not feel very much inspired, or you think that it seems a little bit too difficult, and then you bear with me and we're going to do that together. So for instance, one of the first things that we could think of is irregular verbs, because in irregular verbs there are different verb forms that most students are very familiar with. So these forms, let's take the example of the verb see, for instance. See is obviously the infinitive form, and then you've learned irregular verbs by heart and you know that it goes see, saw, seen. And then you might also know that the second form, that is the form saw, is the form of the past tense. And then the last one, the third one, seen, is the form of the past participle. Now these three forms, the infinitive, the past tense and the past participle, are going to be referred to using symbols. So V0 is the symbol for the infinitive form because it has 0 attributes. It's just the verb itself. And it is the form that we start with, the one that we take and to which we give attributes. We give forms using tools. So we can use, for instance, the past tense, VED. And then, since this is an irregular verb here, the past tense doesn't end in ED. It is saw. But VED still is the symbol that is used for any past tense form, whether it ends in ED or not. And it's the same for the symbol VEN here, which is the symbol for the past participle form of a verb, whether or not it ends in EN, which is actually the case here, seen. Okay, but another example could be set, 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 and in that case V0 is set, the infinitive, and then the past tense is set, VED is set, and VEN is also set, the past participle is set. Okay, so three different forms for any irregular verb, and they're symbols that we're going to learn together because they're going to be very useful. Okay, so this is a start, and maybe now you feel more up to finding out on your own what the other verb operators are. So we know the verb base is V0, and then on our list we also have VED and VEN, and we need to find the other ones. Now, of course, we can ask ourselves, is VEN a tool, an operator that can be used on its own in order to make a sentence in which there is only one verb? Well, it doesn't seem possible. I mean, you might think of things like, given that this is the case, given that given is a past participle. But then there is an ellipsis of the first part of the verb form, and when it is complete, the form is, it is given that. Okay, so the past participle in itself cannot be used alone to give a form to a verb. So actually, if you want to make a sentence with seen, the past participle of see, what do you associate VEN with? Okay, so that could be a question that we could ask ourselves, and the answer would be, okay, the answer would be, yes, actually it would be have plus VEN. Okay, so you can create the sentence, I have seen her, for instance, in which you use VEN, the past participle, seen, but you can't use it alone. You need to associate it with have. I have seen her. Okay? So actually what I'm going to suggest is that we do an exercise that you can find in the book actually. And that exercise is designed for us to come up with a list of verb operators. So it goes like this. First of all, you need to read the sentence and identify the verb phrase or phrases in the sentence. And then you need to decide whether it is correct or not, and make the appropriate corrections if they are necessary. And then you need to identify the different parts of each verb phrase, like we have done just now in I have seen her. The tool that we have used to put the verb see in the sentence is the tool that is called have plus VEN. This is the symbol for the tool that we have used in that sentence. I have seen her, and it is the symbol of an operator, and the name of that operator is, okay, so maybe you already know, it's not written on this slide, so I'm going to let you find out and we'll go over that in a minute. So the question is, anytime I use have plus VEN, the past participle, so I conjugate have and I add the past participle, what verb form do I create? Okay, you can see the answer. So we're going to do that, identify the parts of each verb phrase and their respective forms or symbols like we just did just now. And ultimately the goal of this exercise is going to be to explain how verb tenses are formed. Okay, so like in this case, I have seen her. How does that work? Well, you just take V0, which in that case is see, and then you use the tool have plus VEN. So you conjugate have and you add the past participle of see to create the verb form have seen. Okay, so that's how we go about creating verb forms, and we're going to highlight to show the logic that is inherent in the creation of those verb forms. And then we'll see that the different symbols that we will have come up with, they can combine to create verb formulas that all appear in the verb matrix, which deals also with the second part of the question of verb forms, which is the fact that in order to choose verb operators, you need to know what meaning they express. That's how you choose them. But first of all, in this first part, in this first video, we're focusing on the form that a verb can take. And we're going to have a look at a few sentences here and see if they are correct or not. And first of all, yes, let's read it. He was not being sarcastic, nor was he being funny. So you may pause the video and ask yourself whether it is correct or not. And maybe first of all, highlight the verb phrases. So in this case, there are two verb phrases, was not been and was he been, or was been rather, because he's the subject. And is this correct or not? Well, actually it is not. So what do we have here? Well, what we have here is be, which is conjugated in what tense? Well, that is the past tense, right? And the past tense, the symbol of the past tense is VED. We have already seen that one. So we have be in the past tense, and then we have be again, and that's the past participle of be, so that's VEN. So basically what we have here is be plus VEN. Now, does that exist? Well, yes, it does. Be plus VEN is indeed a tool and operator that you can use to give a form to a verb, but this operator cannot be used with the verb be. Okay? So he was not said to be sarcastic, for instance. That would work, and that would be plus VEN. But VEN here cannot be the past participle of be. Okay, so that is why this sentence is not correct. This verb phrase is not correct. And it's exactly the same thing here, because again we have be here plus the past participle of be, and we have just said that this was not possible. You cannot use be with be plus VEN, that is, you cannot use be in the passive voice. Okay, so what can we do instead? Well, what we can do is that instead of using be plus VEN, we can use another operator, which is be plus VING. And in that case, it works really well, and the sentence now becomes: he was not being sarcastic, nor was he being funny. And in that case, the sentence now is fine. So more explanations will be given later on as regards the second verb phrase here, which has a very special word order or syntactic order. And we will explain that this is because this clause starts with nor. So there is an idea of presupposition that makes it necessary to use this special verb order. Let's go on to the second sentence. The bank has been there every time we wanted to grow. So what does it sound? Is that correct or not? Where is the verb form? So the verb form we're going to look at here is has been, because wanted, obviously, that's the past tense. You remember the symbol is VED, and so that's fine. And we just have to look at this verb phrase here. So is this correct or not? Well, what do we have here? We have, and then we have a verb followed by, in the ing form. So that is the present participle of a verb. So is it possible to have plus VING, the verb in the present participle form, have plus VING? Does that exist? Well, no, it does not. And instead, what does exist, and that we have already seen, is have plus, do you remember, plus the past participle, and the symbol of the past participle and is VEN. So have plus VEN would work here. We could also possibly have be plus VING, but we cannot mix the two. And given the context, have plus VEN will be the better idea here, so that the sentence, once corrected, will be. And you remember that active students are the students who improve their knowledge the most. So remember to answer the questions before I do. So here the sentence is: the bank has been there every time we wanted to grow. So has been is the correct form. Okay, now let's go on to the next sentence, I guess. They are things I have been wondering about for quite a while. So here the verb form is have been wondering about. Actually, have been wondering about, well, that's the preposition. And then there's be here, but it's fine, it's just the present tense. We haven't seen the symbol for the present tense yet, so maybe you could find it before we say it. And is this verb form here, have been wondering, is this correct or not? Well, what do we have here? We have plus the past participle here, so that's have plus VEN. And then we have be plus the present participle, the verb wonder in the VING form. So we actually have plus VEN plus be plus VING. And this sentence is actually correct because the symbols here, the operators, have been combined in a way that is thoroughly acceptable. A training and learning strategy to facilitate the changes is being elaborated. So what do we have here? Let's have a look at is being elaborated. Is this correct or not? Well, actually, here the verb phrase is not correct. For what reason? Can you remember? Well, what do we have here? We have be plus VEN. And this VEN, this past participle, is the past participle of be. So again, it's the same reason as before. You cannot use be plus VEN with be. Okay? So it doesn't work here. And besides, there is, in this sentence, there is be plus VEN, and then again be plus the past participle, so that's be plus VEN twice. And no verb operator can be used twice in a given verb phrase. So for these two reasons, this sentence, this verb form here is not correct. And how can we correct it? Well, actually, we are going to combine, instead of combining be plus VEN twice, we're going to combine be plus VEN with be plus VING. And which one are we going to put first? We're going to use be plus ING first, okay? So let's do it. And the sentence, once corrected, will be a training and learning strategy to facilitate the changes is being elaborated. And this time it is correct because we have be plus VING here, and then be plus VEN, so that's fine. We do not have the same operator twice. Okay, so we have seen already quite a few verb operators and their symbols. So let's point out that in this verb phrase here, in this VP, there are three different verb operators. So the first one is VS, that appears on the first B here, and then this present tense, and so the symbol for the present tense is VS. I think that's the first time we're mentioning that, VS, and of course the S is here for you to remember that in the third person singular, the verb always ends with an S, like in he does or she asks. And so this is the present tense, and the present tense is on what? Is on be, obviously, and be is followed by a verb in the ing form. So we have VS and then be plus VING. And then this VING is actually be, which is followed by the past participle, VEN, of the verb elaborated. So we have VS plus be plus VING plus be plus VEN. So hopefully you're getting more and more familiar with these verb operators, and it will be easier and easier for you to identify them in the verb forms, and we will see that there are actually very few verb operators, and that the way they combine together is also really easy to understand. Let's go on to the next sentence. It has been, okay, so how do you read this? because many students might not be quite sure, so you need to learn irregular verbs by heart. And for now, I don't know, maybe we're going to say it has been read, we're not sure yet. We need to be sure before, but I want to repeat it. So the verb form here, the verb phrase, the VP is has been read. Is this correct or not? What do we have here? Oh, okay, I think I said has been read. It might be has been read. So we need to make sure which is the correct pronunciation. So in this case, we have followed by ing, and we've already seen that have plus VING does not exist. It's not on our list of operators. It does not exist. And what does exist is have plus VEN. So that's what we want here. We want have plus VEN, and we're going to put the past participle here instead of the present participle. So we're going to say it has been, and we still don't know how to read this, so we need to learn our irregular verbs and also make sure we know how to pronounce them. Make sure we know what phonemes are used, and that's when the International Phonetic Alphabet comes in very handy, because we can write down the pronunciation, and that will be very helpful for us to remember it, because you can't possibly remember everything the first time you see it. And also it's been proven scientifically that if you write something down, it's like you're printing it in your memory and you remember it much more easily. So what can we see here? The verb base, the infinitive V0 is read with a tense vowel. And then the past tense is, oh, okay. So that's a mistake. That's a mistake. Okay. So it should be the same one here. Okay, read, read, obviously. So this is not correct, and we need to have this transcription here instead. Okay, so make sure you correct it. And remember, so the pronunciation for the past tense is the same as for the past participle. Read, read, and then this sentence here reads, it has been read before, but I want to repeat it. And you can work on the International Phonetic Alphabet with the videos that I have posted online. The first one is an introduction to make you understand how important it is to pronounce words correctly, and the fact that you can't rely on the spelling for that. So there are quite a few examples in there for you to test how good your pronunciation is. And then the second video is a presentation of the International Phonetic Alphabet, and there are more details in the third video, which also is about different resources that you can use to improve your pronunciation. And that's all on the YouTube channel ESL Academy that you can find at this address or just by typing the keywords. Okay, let's go on to the next step. We're actually halfway through the exercise that we're making to come up with a list of all the operators we can use to give a form to a verb. So let's recap briefly. So far we have seen that those tools we can use are the past, and the symbol of the past is VED. The perfect, did we mention that it was the perfect? I think I asked the question. I don't know if I answered it. I don't think I did. Anyway, so have plus VEN, anytime you conjugate have, and then use the past participle of a verb right after it, you're actually creating the perfect. And then we have also seen the passive voice, so you conjugate be and you add the past participle. we have seen the be plus VING form and the present tense, and the symbol for the present tense is VS. So all these are symbols, and you know that the past tense is not necessarily ending in ed, nor is the present necessarily ending in s, or the past participle ending in en. Those are just symbols, and the actual form the verb can take may vary. Okay, so very quickly here, we did not put a name, be plus VING. Why did we not say that it is the progressive form or the continuous form? Because it is a really important point that needs to be discussed, thought through, and we will only use this tag, this name, if we actually convince ourselves that this be plus VING form is used to express an idea of progression or continuity. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense to use that name. So we will deal with the meaning expressed by the different tools later on in this work. And right now we're leaving it this way, and that gives you time to think about that question. Is the be plus VING form used to express the idea of something that it is progressive or continuous? The next sentence, she may have been expected results more quickly than would has been possible in any organization. So here there are two different verb phrases or verb forms, and are they correct or not? There is another operator that appears here that we hadn't seen before, and that operator here is may and there is would, but both of them are part of the same series of operators that are called modals. I don't know if I have written it somewhere here. So yes, so those operators like may and would, they're called, oh gosh, we're getting there, they're called modals. And modals are always followed by a verb base. Therefore, the symbol for modals is modal plus V0. And we're going to talk later on about how important it is to use symbols to refer to operators, because it's really helpful to use the operators correctly. So for instance, anytime you use a modal, if in your head you think, yeah, modal plus V0, then you're going to check that you did use the verb base right after the modal, okay? And actually you can see here that this is not what has been done. Would, the modal, is not followed by V0, so we know right away that this is not correct, and we also know how to correct it, okay? How about the other one? Well, the other verb form looks correct, but then when we read the sentence, does it make sense? And that's the second part of the work that we have to do with verb forms. First of all, check the verb form itself, and then check that it fits in that context, that it makes sense in the context in which it appears. So, so in this case, we have here the passive voice, be plus VEN. That's the passive voice, and that's what doesn't make sense here. Therefore, we cannot have be plus VEN, and we need to use instead just that's exactly what we did already in sentence 4. We need to use instead be plus VING. So let's do that. And now the sentence reads, she may have been expecting results more quickly than would have been possible. And actually we knew that the passive voice was not possible here because you cannot use the passive voice and then add an object. If you want to add the object, you need to use the active voice. And then you have subject, verb, object, the very traditional composition of sentences in many languages. And whereas when you use the passive voice, what you have right after the verb is the agent, which is generally introduced by, and that's not what we had here, which is why we had to correct the sentence the way we did. Now let's stop a minute to talk about modals very quickly. Can you pause the video and make a list of modals? So we know that in that list there is may and there is would. Can you find the other ones? And also, do you know what modals are used for? So pause the video. And now that you have your list of modals, let's go over it together. So we're going to say that modals are tools that the speaker uses to express his or her point of view. So for instance, if I say she comes tomorrow, I'm not expressing a point of view, just merely facts. And if I say she may come tomorrow, then I'm saying that I think it is a possibility. So I'm expressing a point of view. Okay? So that's just a quick reminder of what modals are used for. So the symbol here is what we're going to use all the time to make sure we use modals correctly, and add V0 right after the modal. And so this is an exhaustive list. All the modals appear here on this page. And you can see that they can be used either with the present tense or with the past tense. So in the present tense, may, can, shall, will, must, need, dare. And in the past tense, might, could, should, would, must, need, dare. So as you can see, the last three have the same form in the present and past tenses. And the last two can also be verbs, and they're really not very much used. Make sure you pronounce these three correctly, because the letter L is not pronounced. And one last point I would like to highlight is the fact that will is a modal in the present tense that refers to the idea of probability. Okay, so it's not the future tense. There is no future tense in English. And this is actually, I'm repeating myself, a modal used to express an idea of something that is probable. So it is probable that something is going to happen in the future, which is why the idea of probability has been confused for the idea of future tense. But it's actually a modal that expresses an idea of probability in the present tense. And would expresses the same idea of probability, but in the past tense. Okay, so that was just a quick parenthesis. And let's go on to the next sentence. I'll finally show you how I should have been being with you every day. So when I read this sentence, the verb phrase here, should have been being, might strike me as sounding a bit weird, a bit strange. Not very common, not very natural, and I might conclude that, well, this is not correct. And this sentence is actually interesting because it shows us how important it is to use both our intuition and a more rational technique to go about deciding which form is correct or not correct. So let's have a look at the operators that this verb phrase includes. So again, can you pause the video and make a list of the operators that are that have been used to come up with that verb phrase. Okay, so those operators are, we can see that this is not shall in the present tense, this is should in the past tense. So we have the past tense here on a modal, and that modal is followed by a verb base. Okay, so past tense, VED, a modal in the past tense, so that's should, followed by a verb base, that's have. So that verb base have is followed by the past participle here, been, and have plus VEN. Well, that's the formula, the symbol for the perfect. And then we have be here and a verb, which happens to be be again, but we have be here plus VING. So be plus VING. So we have these four symbols in this sentence. Is that grammatically correct or not? Well, actually, the verb matrix that we're going to study is going to show us that yes, it is correct indeed. It is grammatically correct. Because the order is fine and because the combinations are fine, so everything is fine, and we'll go into more detail as regards the meaning in subsequent video. For now, let's go on to the next sentence. We're still working essentially on the form a verb can take. I think that it is fair to say that this bill, which has been introduced quite a while ago, puts forward measures worth recognizing. So we're just going to look at the verb phrase that's the most interesting for us, because think here obviously is only the present tense, so that's VS. And then it is fair, so that's VS again, to say that's just V0. Yeah, actually we're not going to deal with those forms, so it would be important to point out that the verb matrix doesn't take into account the cases like this one here, in which we have V1 and V2. So two verbs, V1 and V2, that follow one another. Because in this case, the second verb, V2, can be introduced using means that we're not going to look into in the verb matrix, or at least not in this first version of it. So yeah, let's look at has been introduced. Does that work? Well, what do we have here? We have in the present tense followed by VEN, the past participle, so that looks fine. And then we have be plus VEN. So that's the passive voice, the symbol of the passive voice, and that looks correct too. So yeah, that looks fine from the point of view of the form of the verb phrase. And then there is a second step that is really key for us to make sure that the verb phrase is correct. And it is looking at the rest of the text, at the co-text, at the context to make sure that this VP here, this verb phrase, makes sense in this context. So how do we do that? How can we put ourselves in the shoes of the speaker and really know what they want to express? Well, we need to look for markers. So what marker, what words, what little word can we highlight here that will let us know how the speaker sees what they're talking about here? Well, in this case, the marker is going to be no, actually let me first say that we have here the same kind of problem as the one we had in sentence 6, in which the verb form in itself was correct, but the passive voice didn't make any sense with the rest of the sentence, and we had to switch to the be plus ing form. So here there's the verb phrase in itself is correct, but it doesn't work with the rest of the sentence. And we can see that thanks to a marker, which tells us that that VP is not appropriate. So can you see that marker? Yes, so that marker is actually a go, because a go refers us back to a past period of time, and that past period of time is not compatible with the use of the present tense here. So this is not actually correct, and we need to associate the use of a go with the use of the past tense. Therefore, the sentence, once corrected, will be, I think it is fair to say that this bill, which was introduced quite a while ago, so we need to use here the past tense with the passive voice. Okay, so that's be plus VEN. That's the symbol for the passive voice. And be is in the past tense. Okay, so there are these two steps which are really key to make sure your verb form is correct. You need to associate two different levels of analysis. The first one is all about checking that the verb phrase, the VP, is in conformity with the basic rules of the creation of VPs. So that means that the symbols used in that verb phrase are correct. No have plus VING, for instance, you know that only have plus VEN exists. And then make sure the combinations are correct too, and we'll go over which combinations are correct and in what order the symbols can be used or not used later on. So that's the first step. And then the second step consists in looking at the context to make sure that the verb phrase, which is correct, does make sense in this context. Okay, so these two steps are really, really fundamental, and it is very important to make sure that you deal with both of them. The second one obviously is directly related to the semantic value of the verb operators, and we will deal with that really important aspect later on. You can have a look for more details at the video I made on the following question: is a past action always expressed with the past tense? And again, that's on the YouTube channel ESL Academy. Waiting for you. Number 9, since the stock market began in 1872, stock prices rose in about 73% of the years. So in this sentence, two verb phrases, and the symbols, the operators are only VED and VED, so the past tense twice. Is that correct or not? Well, as far as the verb form itself is concerned, everything's fine. And then, is the past tense the right choice in this context? That's the second question, you remember? That's the most difficult one, really. And so this time we again need to look at markers. What markers can we find in this sentence to help us see the meaning that is expressed and see if it is okay to express that meaning with the past tense? So the marker this time, can you see it? The marker is since. And since tells us that we're not focusing on a point in the past. This time, the event is seen as being related to the now moment in which the sentence is being pronounced. Therefore, in that case, since there is a relation to now, a connection to now that is implied by the use of since, Is it possible to use the past tense when what we're referring to is a connection to the present moment? Obviously, no. We need to express that idea of connection or interconnection between the present and the past, and the past tense here is not acceptable. It doesn't make sense. Instead, we need to use the present perfect. We need to use the present perfect, and the present perfect can be considered as one of the 4 different forms that the present tense in English can take, which will be obvious once you have studied the verb matrix. Okay, so actually, since the stock market began in 1872, this whole clause here implies that the next verb cannot be in the past tense and needs to be expressed with an operator that shows this idea of interconnection between the present and the past. The present perfect, have risen is necessary here. Let's go on to the last example. So there was actually a lot of pauses in the conversation where it seemed like there was underlying conversations that would have been being had there not been other people in the room. Okay, so maybe I should have given you some time to read it on your own, and maybe you would have had the impression that all the words in red here are one single verb form, but the way I read it maybe made it clear for you that actually had and had are part of 2 different verb phrases. So when you read that sentence, you can hear that there's a very short pause here, and that there are 2 verb phrases. The first one in red would have been being had, and the second one in blue, had there not been. First of all, had there not been, we find in that sentence the same word order as in sentence number 1. You remember in sentence number 1, we had, he was not being sarcastic, nor was he being. So, nor was he being. And the operator here appears before the subject he. And so as you can see in the book, it is explained that this is because nor makes it necessary to reverse the usual order of words, because it implies something that has already been envisioned, been made clear for the co-speakers. It has been already envisioned, and therefore it has a presuppositional status. Okay, so that's one thing, and it's the same idea of presupposition that is to be found here in had there not been, in which the reversed order of words expresses the idea that there is a supposition, a hypothesis that is being made here. So when you say had there not been other people in the room, you express the same kind of meaning as when you say if there had not been other people in the room. And if is not mentioned, and instead the order of words is reversed. So in both cases there is an idea of presupposition that explains why the word order is not the usual one. How about the verb phrase in red here? Is it correct or not? What do you think? What operators does it comprise? Let's write them down. So again, pause the video and do it yourself. That's the best way to learn. And once you've done it, let's do it together. So here, would is obviously in the past tense. So VED is the first operator that we find here. And that past tense is obviously on a modal. So the next operator is modal plus V0. We can see that it is followed by a verb base. And that verb base is the verb base of have. So the next operator is have followed by a past participle. So that's have plus VEN. And that past participle is that of be. And be here is followed by VING. So the next operator is be plus VING. And now that VING is actually on be, which is followed by VEN, a past participle. So we have here the operator be plus VEN. Remember, that's the symbol for the passive voice. And so we have a series of operators here that is really long, which is why it might sound weird to your ears. It's not very common. And the question is that series of operators grammatically correct or not? And we will soon find that the answer is obvious, because this is the order of the verb equation. There is only one order. It's always the same one. It's this one, the one you can see here on the slide on your screen. And yes, and it is always the same order. I have answered that question. So now, is the list of operators complete? Well, on this list, we should also have VS, the present tense, which we have come across. But there's another one that we have not mentioned at all. Do you know what that operator is? Do you? Or do you not? You do, don't you? Of course you do. I couldn't help having a little fun here. And obviously that operator, as you have guessed, is do, which is always followed by a verb base. So do plus V0 is the operator that we need to add to that list, and so is VS. In order for the list to be complete, so thanks to this exercise, we've come up with a list of verb operators that is exhaustive. We have a list of all the tools that we can use to give a form to a verb in English. So let's recap with this table here. So the present tense, the symbol of which is VS, and then VED, the symbol of the past tense. Then we know we can also use a series of modals, and their symbol is modal plus V0 because they're always followed by a verb base. And then the perfect, and its symbol is have plus VEN, and the be plus VING form, and then the passive voice, and its symbol be plus VEN. So you understand that a symbol is like a formula, and it tells you how to create the form. So you know you need to conjugate be or have or the modal in the present or the past tense, and then add V0 or the past participle or the present participle to create whatever the symbol enables us to create. So be plus VEN to create the passive voice. And then there's also do plus V0 that we need to add to our list in order to make different kinds of sentences. So that's the exhaustive list of all the symbols that can be used for any verb form in English except for V2s. You remember if there's a verb that follows another verb, then it might be added using different means, which are not listed here. But these are, apart from those cases, these are the symbols that are used to create any verb forms. And as I said in the book, it's really key to use the symbols themselves. Do not just talk about modals, but do talk about modal plus V0, because in that case it will be much easier for you to avoid quite a few mistakes like the ones we have seen at the beginning of this video. You remember in this exam paper the student wrote, "They will be told." And if you just remember that will is a modal and that the symbol for the modal or the formula for the modal is modal plus V0, then you just check and you can see right away that you need to use the verb base here, will be told to. Okay, and you didn't be seen. So in this case, you did write, I mean the student who wrote that exam paper did write do plus V0, and then we have be plus VING. So these two are correct. And the answer to why this verb form is not correct, we will see in the next video when we will work on the verb equation, which will make it clear that operators that are orange, so the orange operators, are not compatible with the green one, which is why operators have colors, for you to remember some of their key characteristics. The next one, she doesn't have left. So again, that's do plus V0, and that's have plus VEN. But the verb equation will teach us that the green operator, do plus V0, is not compatible with any of the orange ones. So it's not compatible with have plus VEN. He was being told. What's this? That's be plus VEN, and again be plus VEN. Plus, there's also the fact that this is be plus VEN, so the passive voice with be, and that doesn't work. It doesn't make sense to use the passive voice plus for be. And it's not possible to use any operator 2 times in a row. So be plus VEN plus be plus VEN is not an option. It's not possible. Their landlines were have done away with. So what do we have here and how do we correct that? Were have done away with. So that's be plus V0, right? B plus V0, does that exist? No, B plus V0 does not exist, so that doesn't work. So that needs to be changed altogether. And actually what we need here, I think, was have been done away with. Okay, and the last examples I had taken from those exam papers were examples in which the verb forms, the verb phrases, the VPs are actually correct, but are they appropriate in those contexts? Okay, so that's a question we cannot answer now because we need to do some work on the meanings expressed by the various operators that we have identified. And for now, we're focusing mainly on the forms a verb can take. And I hope you understand that using verb symbols is really easy and fundamental for you to avoid quite a few mistakes. So very quickly, why talk about operators, not auxiliaries? So again, this is a point that is mentioned in the book, and I explain that an auxiliary is something that is secondary, and it's a word that was appropriate when the vision most linguists or grammarians had in the 20th century was that those auxiliaries played an auxiliary or a secondary part in order to put verbs in sentences. But now, and actually since the second half of the 20th century, I think, most linguists consider that auxiliaries actually do not play a secondary part but an essential part in the operations that consist in making verb phrases. So they are really fundamental operators. So there's a switch in conceptions. The conceptions evolved, and so did the language. Operator means that we're referring to something, a tool that we regard as playing an essential part. That's the point that is reminded in the book on the verb equation. Okay, so a few other points mentioned here. I would like to go quickly to these last 2 points here. It is really important to make sure you see the difference between an operator and a verb, especially when it comes to have and do, because both of them can have either a status. They can be either, have can be either a verb or an operator. And obviously they do not work the same way depending on their status. So when have is a verb, then you're going to need to use do plus V0 to make all the different types of sentences, or most of them, apart from the positive declarative sentence. So like here, to make an interrogative sentence, you need to associate the verb have to the operator do, and you will say, does this luggage have built-in shelves? Well, this is a difficult sentence because have is followed by VEN, but it's a past participle that is used as an adjective, as you can see here, since it's connected to another word there, and both of them built in qualify a noun. So that's an adjective. So that's not have plus VEN, so that's not the operator. But, and that's the way you recognize and you distinguish the operator from the verb. As soon as you can see that have is followed by a past participle, and you make sure that that past participle does not have the function of an adjective, then in that case, you are seeing the operator have plus VEN, and therefore the operator is the tool that you use to make all the different types of sentences. Okay, so the question here would be, has the team built the business from scratch? So they're not used the same way, and you need to make sure this is clear for you. And it's the same thing with do, which can be either a verb or an operator. And again, it won't be used the same way. So if it's only a verb, one has to really do the math. So we can tell that here we do not have do plus V0. Therefore, it's not the operator, it's just the verb. So we need to associate it with the operator do plus V0 to create a question in most of the different types of sentences. More details are given in the book. So you'd have, does one have to really do the math? And if do plus V0 is what we have, then that's what we use to create the question, the interrogative sentence. So she does have unusually high potential. And the question, so here we can see we have do plus V0. And so that's the operator we use to create the question. Does she have unusually high potential? Okay, so make sure you master the difference between the cases in which have and do are verbs or operators. And then I guess that's it. We have seen the exhaustive list of all the tools or the operators you can use to give a form to a verb in English. And so make sure you use those symbols. They're really simple. There are very few of them, and they are very useful for you to make sure you use them correctly. And next time we'll see how they can combine one with the other in the English verb equation. So that's actually the topic of the book, the English verb equation, and this presentation, it was a first part to get you ready to really understand how the verb equation works. And you'll see this is a really, really simple and fundamental tool for you to use. Thank you for your attention. I'll see you in the next video. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best.